How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to my Battlefield 3 weapon guide video series. Today's featured weapon is the 870 MCS, the Remington 870 shotgun, which in Battlefield 3 is a PDW weapon, meaning you can use this shotgun on any of your classes. And despite being pretty far into the series so far, this is actually one of the first unlocked weapons you get your hands on at level 1. For some reason I skipped this weapon back in the early days of the series because there were lots of other weapons that I wanted to play around with that were probably more competitive. I always found that the shotguns didn't really suit Battlefield that much, being a game where there's quite wide open maps, but it can be useful in certain situations in team deathmatch games, or if you're on one of those maps where there's lots of close quarters combat. The shotguns on the 870 MCS in particular can be really handy. So let's get started and take a look at some general stats of the 870 MCS. I've listed the power as high, as soon as you can get one-shot kills with the shotguns, but you do have to bear in mind that the range is quite short, meaning that you'll need multiple shots at long range to take anyone out. At least unlike Call of Duty games, the shotgun pellets don't disappear in thin air, and the Battlefield game is slightly more realistic in that your shots will still get hit markers even at long range. But the shotguns as a whole are still pretty much a short-range weapon, at least with the default buckshot ammunition. There are some other shells that you can equip to kind of tailor the shotguns into different kind of roles. Recoil of the weapon is low. It's got a slightly higher than average sensor speed, plus the fact that it's pump action, so you don't really notice that recoil too much. Capacity of the weapon is a low 5 rounds. That's 4 in the magazine tube and 1 in the chamber. This is the lowest out of all the shotguns, but the shotguns as a whole only have up to 8 rounds in their magazines. And finally, rate of fire is very slow at 33 rounds per minute. Being a pump action shotgun means it's got the slowest fire rate when compared to all the semi-auto shotguns. So I've been using this Remington 870 in my own personal games for a fair while now, and I've ranked it all the way up to unlock those slug shells, hoping that it would get better. But it turns out it's still a kind of a hit marker machine at medium to long ranges, so I was kind of a little bit disappointed with it. For balancing purposes in computer games, you've got to only really allow shotguns to perform well at close ranges, but what always annoys me is in games like Black Ops and Battlefield, where you still end up getting hit markers even at close range. In first-person shooters, I want the shotguns to dominate at close range, and I think you should get a definite one-shot kill in their deadly range. In Battlefield 3, you'll still find hit markers in fairly close quarters battles, which doesn't really make the weapon worth using in most situations. When you consider that most of your engagements are long range in typical Battlefield games, it makes the shotguns kind of obsolete. But like I mentioned, you can have some fun in game with the shotguns, especially in team deathmatch and even hardcore modes where you're less likely to get those hit markers. In games like Rush or Conquest, you might want to leave these shotguns until you reach a portion of the map where you're in close quarters combat, like the inner corridors of Operation Metro, or any of the buildings where you find snipers squatting in the upper stories. But let's take a look at my recommendations of a configuration for your 870 MCS in Battlefield 3. It's worth remembering that your spread of shots will be slightly tighter when aiming down sights, so the optics aren't quite as obsolete as you might think. The iron sights on the weapon are perfectly adequate for generally aiming down sights and firing a shot off in a general direction, but there's nothing like a red dot sight just to give you that clearer picture of where you're aiming. So you get hold of the reflex red dot sight for 10 kills, which is just a non-magnifying gun sight to replace your iron sights. For the primary attachment, we've only basically got 2 attachments which kind of perform well in game. We've got the extended mag or laser sight. The laser sight after 8 kills does give you that increased hip fire accuracy, but like I mentioned, you do run into quite a few hit markers with the shotguns in game, so having those extra couple of shells in your magazine really do help out, so you're not left with your pants down while trying to replenish that magazine tube. Extended mag after 30 kills only increases your mag size by 2 rounds, but those extra 2 rounds can be handy just to increase the time between having to reload. Then finally, for the secondary attachment, this is where all the customization really comes into play with the shotguns. We've got the choice of 4 different types of ammo, the 12 gauge buckshot, which you get by default, flechette rounds, frag rounds and slug rounds. And like I mentioned, when I first started using the shotguns, or the 870 MCS in particular, I was really looking forward to unlocking those slug rounds, expecting them to really make a big difference. After trying out all the different types of ammo, I ended up settling back with the default 12 gauge buckshot, which kind of makes the weapon perform much like you'd expect a shotgun to perform in a computer game. 12 gauge buckshot just basically fires out that group of pellets like we're all used to, so it makes the weapon more powerful at close quarters and has that slight spread of pellets that allows you to get kills without being exactly on target, which makes spraying from the hip much more beneficial. In my opinion, the flechette rounds are probably the second most useful ammunition for the 870. Flechette rounds are lower in damage than the buckshot rounds, but you do have increased range and better penetration through walls. Not to mention that increased penetration through your enemies, which means getting those multi kills a lot easier. I'm sure we're all familiar with frag rounds thanks to those USAS 12 frag round spammers, but frag rounds don't work too good on the 870 since it's pump action. With the frag rounds you really have to fire off 2 or 3 shots and make sure those shots hit a wall or the ground around the enemy in order for those explosions to do the work. Then finally we've got the slug rounds, which have the most damage and the highest range, but unlike buckshot, the slug rounds only fire off one small projectile, which makes the shotguns perform more like a sniper rifle in that you need a higher zoom optic to be able to take those long range shots. So overall, instead of the frag rounds you might as well use some sort of rocket launcher, RPG or grenade launcher, and instead of the slug rounds you might as well just use the sniper rifle, which will use basically the buckshot and flechette rounds. And since you get plenty of hit markers anyway, even at close quarters, that decreased damage you get from the flechette rounds doesn't really help out, so overall I'll just stick with the 12 gauge buckshot as your ammunition of choice. So that's about it for my guide to the 870 MCS in Battlefield 3. If you enjoyed it or if you're a fan of this weapon, please drop me a thumbs up below, just help give my videos a little bit more widespread exposure. Don't forget to check out the link to the playlist down in the description to check out any of the previous episodes you might have missed. Otherwise, thanks for watching and I'll catch you all later.